a believer, or even an in-betweener, we invite you to keep an open mind and to consider the explanations I present to you. But do understand that I do not offer the only explanations. I hope you all had a chance to visit Cromwell's parlor of paranormal curiosities inside. If so, you would have experienced a small taste of our passion as collectors and investigators into the ghostly realm. These items have been collected from their previous owners and safely locked away in this room in hopes of one day achieving a greater understanding of the supernatural world. If you did not have a chance to visit Cromwell's, then I encourage you to do so at a later time. Now, while on board, all passengers must observe a short list of rules that we call the rules. So, here are the rules. While on board, it is recommended but not required that passengers wear masks. And when social distancing guidelines permit, I may remove my mask to better enhance your storytelling experience. During our journey tonight, please keep everything and everyone you hold dear inside the trolley at all times. If you happen to lose anything from the trolley, we cannot stop to retrieve it. At this time, we will ask you to please silence all digital devices and to keep conversation to a minimum, out of respect of those nearby trying to listen. There is no boozing or alcohol of any kind while on board, and smoking is not allowed. Unless, of course, you're on fire. Now, while the trolley is in motion, please remain seated at all times. You do not want to lose your seat to a ghostly visitor. You may take as many pictures as you'd like, and we encourage you to do so. However, please do not flash anyone still alive. And finally, at the conclusion of the tour, please remember to take all your personal belongings and members of your party with you when you leave. Now, I'd like to introduce you all to our driver tonight. Everyone say, hello, Sharky. That was not a Jaws reference, that's actually his name. Now I'm going to ask Sharky to begin our tour. We're holding... What is happening? Are the spirits going crazy? Who are we waiting on? The spirits are not going to be happy about this. We have a schedule to keep to. Well, while we are waiting, friends, I do want to encourage you to take a look at your phones and cameras. At this point, make sure that you do have your flight. Now, Sharky is working on getting his driver's license back after a minor incident with a hearse last week. And if he can get us all the way through the city and back safely tonight, he'll be one step closer to success. So let's all be supportive. Now, do you all have your cameras and phones ready for tonight? Yes? Well, tonight you are all honorary ghost hunters. And as I said, we encourage you to take many, many photos. And we recommend that you do so in groups of 3. This way you will have something to immediately compare to see if you've captured any ghostly evidence or not. The types of evidence that you will be looking for tonight are orbs, vortexes, shadow ghosts, and apparitions. Now, orbs are the most commonly photographed anomaly. They appear as a translucent ball of light hovering just above the ground and are often captured with a trail behind them. It is this trail that will help you identify if you've captured an orb or just dust in the wind. Vortexes are also known as funnel ghosts, and they appear just as their name describes them. They show up as a swirling funnel of energy and are often felt as a cold spot. So stay alert. You never know when you may feel a sudden chill. Shadow ghosts, though, are hard to discern from natural shadows. So keep your eyes open. They are incredibly sneaky and evasive. And finally, apparitions. Now, apparitions are what every ghost hunter dreams of capturing. They appear in transparent human form, wearing the clothing of their period. And many believe that this is the clothing that they died in. Now, they too can be quite difficult to capture, as it is said that they can pose right next to you and still not appear in your selfie. But I think we should get started with my favorite story. St. Augustine was founded in 1565, and fierce conflict soon followed. From the north, the French descended on the newly arrived Spanish forces, led by none other than Don Pedro Menendez. Now the French were confident that they could overwhelm the Spanish, but there's one thing they didn't take into account: hurricane season. You see, as they attacked, a massive storm erupted off the coast and pummeled their entire fleet, smashing all their ships to pieces. Out of 2,000 sailors, less than 200 would survive. These men did crawl to shore just south of the Matanzas Inlet, where they were captured by none other than the Spanish. But the Spanish had no room and no food for their new French prisoners, so they offered them an ultimatum: give up your religion and become one of us, or die. Well, the French refused to convert to Catholicism, so one by one, their throats were slit and their bodies tossed into the bay, which ran red with blood for 3 whole days. Now, many say these victims still make themselves known. In fact, our earliest ghost sighting was by a 16th century priest who reported seeing the water here turn bright red on a moonlit night, and many others have since reported the same thing. So stay alert if you are out on the water. We are now entering the grounds of the most haunted building in St. Augustine. That it is on the National Registry of Haunted Places and has been visited by some of the best in the business. This includes ghost hunters, paranormal seekers, and most recently, kindred spirits. I would like to personally welcome you all to the old jail. In just a moment, we will pause in front of the jail, and I encourage you to take many, many photos, especially focusing on the windows. You see, it is not uncommon for someone to capture a permanent resident peeking back at them. And even if you don't think you've captured anything right at this moment, do enlarge your photos later, and you may just be surprised. Now, why is this building so haunted? Well, the answer may lie in its morbid history. You see, from 1891 to 1953, this was the St. Johns County Jail, and it was designed as an open-air jail. Does anyone know what that means? No windows. Well, it means that all those glass panes behind the iron bars didn't exist. This left the prisoners exposed to the worst that Florida had to offer. In the summer, they would experience extreme heat, humidity, and even torrential downpours. While in the winter, if it was cold enough for frost to cover the ground, it coated their metal bunks inside. There was no such luxury as a mattress. Now, these cells were built to contain 4, but they often housed 10 to 12 prisoners each. To put that into perspective, the distance between the bunks on either sides of these cells, you had to walk sideways between them. And it wasn't just humans that resided here. Anything that could hop, fly, slither, creep, and crawl its way between those bars, well, that was your new bunkmate for the night. The men here would be dragged out in shackles, tossed into convict carts like the one up under the trees near the flags on your left, at the front of the parking lot. From there, they would be taken to work on the chain gangs and do the jobs that nobody else wanted to do. This included building roads, swamp drainage, and working in the turpentine camps. They would be kept alive on a ration of grits, beans, coffee, and hardtack. Sounds good, doesn't it? Well, at the end of a 12-hour-long day, they would be dragged back here to the jail and tossed back into their overcrowded cells, and got to do it all again the next day. Conditions here were unsanitary and inhumane, to say the least. Take a moment to imagine the stench of those overcrowded cells. Now add in the smell of overflowing toilet buckets. You see, the average life expectancy here was just 2 years, and during that time, prisoners would be plagued with mosquitoes, cockroaches, rats, lice, and bed bugs 24 hours a day. But bathing was provided once a month and in shared bath water. Not too bad if you were the first one in, but can you imagine following 70 others through the same tub? And ladies, we were last. We went after all the men. Now, this building was built to contain murderers, horse thieves, and occasionally the innocent, especially when authorities just needed a trumped-up charge to meet their chain gang quotas. These walls were to contain the feelings of hatred, rage, greed, violence, and vengeance. And energies like that don't just leave when you drag the dead bodies outside. They seep into the walls and leave a permanent stain. These energies have actually been experienced by tour staff, paranormal investigators, and yes, even guests. In fact, tour staff here have quit mid-shift after being suddenly pushed down the stairs. Others here have reported feeling the touch of an unseen human hand, and others still have reported being scratched. Now, sounds echo throughout the jail that sound like muffled conversations between prisoners. These sounds have even been recorded, and sometimes a word or two can be heard. Now, paranormal investigators would call these recordings EVP. Does anyone know what that stands for? It stands for Electronic Voice Phenomenon. Now, this is a voice embedded in white noise that many believe are the dead trying to communicate with us. They are unexplained and sometimes difficult to understand. In 2010, a local paranormal researcher named George Lopez and his team came here to the old jail and captured several of these recordings. We would love to share one with you tonight. Now, the perfect setting to share this recording is, of course, behind the old jail, right next to our gallows. This is also the perfect photo opportunity for the first floor windows, because you see, this is where this particular recording was captured. These windows are death row, and it should be appearing on your right. Ah, yes, Sharky, this is the perfect setting for this recording. So what do you all think? Would you like to hear it?
Yeah.
Wonderful. We shall play it for you now. Did you hear that? It says there was only 8. Now, at the time this recording was captured, we didn't know what it meant. But further research into the jail's history would reveal that after all the death this particular building had seen, there were only 8 documented executions. Now, at that same paranormal investigation, another researcher would have the fright of her life. You see, she was part of a team on the 2nd story when she decided that it would be a good idea that night to go all by herself. Now, she stepped around a particular cell block and began to take pictures. During one particular photo, the flash illuminated the space in front of her, and there she saw a man crouched, arms raised. He was bald and wearing jail stripes. He was looking at her and smiling. Well, she only saw him as the flash illuminated the space in front of her, and then she was quickly plunged back into darkness. She panicked, realizing she was all alone, and quickly ran off to find the rest of her team to tell them what had happened. She actually captured this panic in a recording. Would you guys like to hear it?
Yes. Yeah.
I thought you might. We will play it for you now.
Okay. Now that was not cool, dude. I'm really so sad to see, like, it scared me so bad. I swear to God, I thought it was like, oh my God, it was like somebody, like, he was trying to see me, like, didn't even have any of it was wrong. I'm dead serious, like, that just freaked me out so bad.
You can hear the panic in her voice as she describes the man that she had seen, how he was bald and wearing jail stripes, and he seemed set on scaring her. Well, she quickly fled the cell, fled the jail, and refused to ever return again. Now, as we move along, if you think you're brave, or in fact braver than she was, you too can have your own ghost hunting experience with the new Old Jail After Dark experience. So what do you all think? Is anyone on board brave enough to take on such a challenge?
Yep.
I am.
Oh, you are? Oh,
I
you
am.
are braver than I am. Well, just to let you all know that some of our spirits here have been known to make a jailbreak on occasion and have followed some of our guests home. We have received letters. However, it is also said that if you tell a ghost not to follow you, it will respect your wishes and stay behind. So I think we should cover our bases and do that right now. On the count of 3, I'd like everyone to say, "Don't follow me, ghost." Ready? 1, 2, 3. Don't follow me, ghost. Well done. And for those of you that didn't do it, I hope you didn't just make a grave mistake. Now, as we leave the old jail, do remember that St. Augustine is our oldest city, which means it's home to some of our oldest cemeteries. So what do you all think? Would you like to visit a cemetery or two tonight?
Yes.
Of course. Why else would you come on a ghost tour? Well, the first cemetery that we are going to visit is our Huguenot Cemetery. It is down the road quite a ways and will eventually appear on your right. So before we get there, let me tell you a little bit about it. In 1821, supplies began to run low in the city. Thankfully, a supply ship was soon spotted off the horizon and did eventually drift into the bay. Now, when it made it into the bay, citizens here quickly rushed out to board it. However, once on board, all they found were bodies. Bodies everywhere. You see, not one member of the crew had survived, not even the captain. But supplies were supplies, so they grabbed every crate and barrel they could find and brought it with them back into the city. What they didn't realize is that this ship also brought with it yellow fever. Soon the city found itself amidst an epidemic, with up to 12 people dying each day. That may not seem like a lot to you, but do remember that our population back then was not as strong as it is today. Our Huguenot Cemetery was built for our Protestant population, and it soon began to run out of room. So it was decided that they were to dig graves around the cemetery. And these were to be mass graves, with up to 25 bodies in each one. But hey, if you were the last one into the hole, you got your name on the headstone. Seems fair, right? Well, many say these victims still make themselves known inside our Huguenot Cemetery, because many believe that they are not resting peacefully. You see, around here, we believe that we are driving upon their final resting places still to this day. So when we get to the Huguenot Cemetery, do have your cameras and phones ready. You may also spot another one of our permanent residents. His name is Judge John Stickney. Now, Judge Stickney was an important man down here in St. Augustine when he unfortunately contracted dengue fever one Halloween night. In denial that he was actually sick, he went forth to Washington, D.C. to visit friends and family, but died a few days later. He was shipped back down here to St. Augustine and buried in the Huguenot Cemetery. After 20 or so years, his family wanted him moved closer to home, so they hired a grave digger. And they must have hired the laziest grave digger in the entire city, because with the job only half done and the coffin only above the ground, he decided to go on a break. At this point, 2 drunkards wandered in, saw the coffin, and thought, like anyone would, that they should have a peek inside. When they looked inside, though, they found bones and the glint of something shiny. You see, the judge had terrible teeth, and fillings back in those days were made of gold. So the drunkards grabbed all of the judge's teeth and ran off, probably to buy the next few rounds or so. This meant, though, that when the gravedigger appeared and saw what had happened, he decided that instead of fessing up, he just closed the coffin and sent it off to Washington, D.C., because no one would notice. Well, Judge Stickney didn't know that his body left him, and he still roams around his old headstone. He appears as a tall apparition, a man in a top hat and cloak, looking for something. Now, many believe that he is in fact looking for his missing teeth. That took them. So you never know, we may just spot him tonight. Now, the Huguenot Cemetery is coming up on your right in just a few seconds, so do have your cameras and phones ready. I will point out his headstone to you to make sure that you capture an image around that area. As I said, he is due to make an appearance. So let's see what we can do now. Now, Judge Stickney's headstone is this large headstone that looks like a bishop's chess piece with the name Stickney on it. Take plenty of pictures around that area. I would also like to point out on your left that these are old city gates. And here is where our most famous ghostly resident is often spotted. I would like everyone to say, hello, Elizabeth.
Hello, Elizabeth.
Now, Elizabeth was the daughter of the gatekeeper, and unfortunately she and her father both passed away during the yellow fever epidemic. But many today still see a young girl in period clothing waving to cars as they pass by. In fact, tourists will often ask shopkeepers about our young child reenactor. But I will tell you right now, we have no child reenactors here in St. Augustine. This is Elizabeth.
We got beer over here,
She has to
folks.
appear in solid form. And if you make direct eye contact with her, she will slowly disappear into a mist. But she still likes to say hello now and again. Before you leave St. Augustine, I encourage you to go stand between our old city gates. If you do this, you may feel a sudden heaviness in the air and a sudden cold chill. If you do this and you feel these things,
Did you see him looking
make
out?
sure you mind your manners and say, hello, Elizabeth. Now, Sharky is driving us to our oldest cemetery here in St. Augustine. This is the Talamato Cemetery, and it was a Spanish Catholic burial site from 1773 to 1884. I do have a question for everyone on board. Does anyone know what Talamato means in Spanish? Any guesses? Well, that's okay, because it's a trick question. You see, Talamato isn't actually Spanish. It's the name of the Native American chief, village, and burial site that was all here well before. So that's perhaps why this particular cemetery is so active, because we have one cemetery on top of another. In fact, many strange sounds, unusual lights, and even apparitions have all been spotted here. So do take plenty of pictures. I'd also like to point out the small white building in the back. Make sure you all take a glance that way, because I'm going to tell you the explosive tale of the man that lies there a little later on. Can you all hear me? Wonderful. I thought I would come up close and personal for this one. Now, here at the Talamato Cemetery, 100 years ago, two boys decided to camp out here overnight. Well, it was actually a dare. You see, they wanted to see if they could make it until morning. Just after midnight, though, they began to hear some strange noises, and they figured that some of their friends had shown up to scare them. Naturally. So the two boys quickly rushed out of their tent, but it wasn't their friends that they saw. Instead, they saw a woman in a glowing white dress, hovering ever closer. She had long gray hair and no face. Completely terrified, the two boys ran screaming out of the cemetery, and I would probably do the very same thing. The next day, they began asking everyone they knew about what they had seen the night before. You see, they were trying to make sense of it. And if you ask, you shall receive. In fact, one particularly old, creepy man stepped forward and said, "I know who you saw in the cemetery." And he began to tell the boys a story. You see, 100 years before their time, a young woman had died 1 week before her wedding due to heart weakness. I know, so sad. And out of respect to the bride-to-be, her family decided to have her buried in her wedding dress. Now this made sense to the boys. They had seen a woman in a white dress, and her lack of face and long gray hair could have been because she was wearing a wedding veil, stained with decay. Well, they stuck to their story and refused to ever step foot in the cemetery again. But friends, she has been spotted recently. So before we drive away, do take a few more photos, because I don't know why she or any of our other spirits are here and make themselves known. But I can tell you, they're here. This is your favorite disembodied voice. Can you all hear me? Wonderful! We are now going to drive to our next destination, which is the front of the Talamato Cemetery. Because there, I would like to introduce you all to our youngest permanent resident. His name is James, and he's a young orphan boy who died here at the age of 5 years old in the 1800s. Now, James loved to play hide and seek amongst the headstones here in the Talamato, seeking ahead to his eldest daughter on her wedding night. She didn't appreciate the gift and re-gifted it to a New York State medical facility. Now, we don't know why Dr. Frederick Whedon did this. Perhaps it was revenge for some ancestors or relatives that were killed in the First Seminole War. But what we do know, for all my children on board, is that all of your parents just got some brand new ideas. So I would encourage you to listen to them and listen closely. The end! Woo! Thank you so much, friends, for joining us tonight. Did you all have fun? Wonderful! If you captured anything strange or unusual tonight, do remember to post it with hashtag Ghosts and Gravestones, because we would love to see it too. If you had fun, do check out our sister Ghosts and Gravestones tours throughout the country. We would love to have you again. And as a reminder, my name is Caitlin, and your driver tonight was Sharky. Everyone say thank you, Sharky!
Thank you, Sharky!
He is now one step closer to getting his driver's license back! And more importantly, if you would like to avoid any curses, unwanted scare packages, or just to keep the ghosts from following you home, then I highly encourage you to give to our glass gratuity coffin, which is up here by me when you come to say good night. Don't worry, we'll keep all the crazy here, believe me. Now, friends, do look around you and make sure that you have all of your personal belongings.